He told me he hadn't cried since he was 9 years old. Said it like it was a point of pride. Like emotional unavailability was a personality trait he'd cultivated with real intention. And then I pressed the alcohol swab to his skin, and he made this tiny, barely there sound. Not pain, just surprise. And something in his face shifted. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to see it. That was Marcus. And that was the night I gave an intramuscular injection in a kitchen in Portland, Oregon, with a thunderstorm doing its absolute best outside, and a man who claimed to be fearless, sitting very, very still on a bar stool, pretending he was fine. He wasn't fine. It started with a text from my college roommate, Dana. She and Marcus had been together for about 2 years, long enough that she'd stopped describing him as this guy I'm seeing, and started just saying his name like I already knew everything, which eventually I did. I knew he took his coffee black. I knew he'd played guitar in a band in his 20s, and still got a little wistful about it. And I knew, from Dana, that he had a prescription for a B12 injection that his doctor had recommended for fatigue, and that he'd been putting it off for 3 weeks because, and this is her exact phrasing, he's being a complete baby about it. The text arrived at around 9 in the evening. The rain was already coming down in sheets. Dana had a work emergency, a real one, something with a client deadline that had her locked in her home office. And Marcus, apparently, had finally agreed to do the injection that night. The pharmacy had filled it. The supplies were sitting on the counter. And Dana, bless her, had texted me, the only person she knew with actual clinical training, and asked if I could come over. I want to be clear. I was already in my pajamas, I had tea, I had a book. The evening had plans, but I also knew that B12 deficiency, left untreated, is not just about being tired. It's neurological. It affects how your nerves function, how your red blood cells form, how clearly you think. 3 weeks of putting it off when someone genuinely needs that supplement, that's not nothing. So I put on real clothes, grabbed my kit, and drove through the kind of rain that makes you question every decision you've ever made. He opened the door before I knocked, which meant he'd been watching for me, which meant he was more anxious than he was letting on. He was tall, the kind of tall where you notice it in a doorway, and he had the look of someone who had recently tried to appear relaxed and mostly succeeded. Mostly. "Dana said you'd come," he said. "You didn't have to." "I know," I said. "I wanted to." That was partially true. Mostly, I wanted to help Dana. But also, and I'm being honest here, there is something I genuinely love about this, about walking into a stranger's kitchen with a small bag of supplies and the specific knowledge that I can make something difficult feel manageable. That's not ego. That's just... it's the part of medicine I find most human. He'd set everything out on the kitchen counter already. The vial, the syringes in their packaging, a stack of alcohol swabs. He'd clearly looked up how to do it himself and then decided against it because there was a printed page from a medical website sitting there, slightly crumpled at one corner, like he'd read it and then set it down with force. "Did you read the whole thing?" I asked. "Enough of it," he said. "Enough to scare yourself?" He didn't answer, which was its own answer. I washed my hands first. Always, always wash your hands. And do it properly. Not a quick rinse, but 20 seconds minimum, working between the fingers, around the thumbs, up the wrists. And then I put on my gloves. There's something about that moment, the snap of the glove, that I've always found steadying. It marks a shift. You're not just a person anymore. You're someone with a job. I looked at the supplies he'd laid out, and walked him through what we'd be doing. Cyanocobalamin, that's the B12 form most commonly prescribed for injection, goes intramuscularly, which means into the muscle, not under the skin, not into a vein. The most common site for self-administration or home injection is the outer thigh, specifically the vastus lateralis. That's the long muscle running along the outside of your upper leg. It's accessible, it's large enough to absorb the medication safely, and it's far enough from major nerves and blood vessels that, when you use proper technique, the risk is minimal. Your thigh, I said simply. That's where we're going. He looked at me. My thigh. Your outer thigh. It's the safest spot for this. I promise it's less dramatic than it sounds. He sat down on the bar stool. He was wearing dark jeans and he rolled up the hem, which wasn't quite what I needed, but I appreciated the effort. I asked him to sit with his foot flat on the floor, leg relaxed. Relaxation is not optional here. A tense muscle resists the needle, makes the injection more uncomfortable, can cause bruising. The whole goal is to get the muscle as soft as possible. Some people find it helps to wiggle their toes, actually. It sounds silly, but it works. It keeps the leg engaged just enough to prevent you from tensing up. I drew the medication into the syringe, checked for air bubbles, tapped the barrel lightly, depressed just enough to clear the air. 1 milliliter. A small volume, but it needs to go into the right place. Look at the window, I told him. Watch the rain. He did, and I found the spot. The middle third of the outer thigh, away from the knee, away from the hip. And I cleaned the area with an alcohol swab in a circular motion, outward from center, and let it dry. This part matters. A wet swab can sting and introduce moisture to the site. You wait. 10 seconds. It's not long, but people always rush it. I held the skin taut with my non-dominant hand. The needle goes in at a 90-degree angle for an intramuscular injection. Straight in, not at a slant, because you're going into the muscle, not just under the skin. The needle I was using was 1.5 inches long, which is standard for an adult with average muscle depth. You insert it in one smooth, confident motion. Not slow. Slow is worse, counterintuitively. It's the hesitation that hurts. One clean movement. He didn't flinch. I aspirated slightly, pulled the plunger back just a fraction to check that I hadn't accidentally entered a blood vessel. No blood return. Good. Then I depressed the plunger slowly, evenly, over about 10 seconds. The medication needs time to disperse into the muscle tissue. Pushing too fast causes pressure, causes pain. I withdrew the needle at the same angle I'd inserted it, applied gentle pressure with a clean swab. Not rubbing, pressing. Rubbing can irritate the site. Done, I said. He turned to look at me. There was a beat of silence. Then, that's it? That's it. I've been putting that off for 3 weeks. I know, I said. You can go ahead and feel however you feel about that. He laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised out of him, and it changed his whole face. I stayed for a cup of tea while Dana finished her call. Marcus sat across the table from me and asked questions. Real ones. Curious ones. He wanted to know how often someone with B12 deficiency needs injections. I told him it depends on the cause. If it's dietary, oral supplements can work once levels are restored. But if it's related to absorption issues, a condition called pernicious anemia, where the stomach doesn't produce enough intrinsic factor to absorb B12 from food, then injections may be ongoing, sometimes monthly, sometimes more frequently. His doctor would guide that. The important thing is not to self-diagnose the frequency. You follow the prescription. You get your levels checked. You adjust based on blood work." He nodded. He was a good listener, it turned out. The kind who actually processes what you say instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. He also mentioned, almost in passing, that he'd had a low-grade fever earlier in the week. Nothing dramatic, just that persistent, mild warmth that sits around 99, 100 degrees and makes you feel vaguely wrong without being dramatically sick. I told him what I always tell people about low-grade fevers. They are usually your body doing exactly what it's supposed to do. A fever is not the enemy. It's the immune system raising the temperature to make the environment hostile to whatever's causing trouble. Unless it climbs above 103 or persists for more than 3 days, or comes with other concerning symptoms, difficulty breathing, severe headache, a stiff neck, you don't necessarily need to suppress it with medication. Rest, fluids, and patience are often the whole answer. He looked at me like I'd said something unexpected. "No one's ever told me to just let it happen," he said. "Most people want to fix it immediately," I said. "But sometimes the body knows what it's doing." Dana finally emerged from her office around midnight, apologetic and a little frantic, and found us finishing our tea in what she later described as suspicious calm. There was nothing suspicious about it. We'd just been talking. But she did look between us with that particular expression that best friends have. The one that's half relief and half something else entirely. And I gathered my bag and said goodnight. Marcus walked me to the door. The rain had slowed to something gentler. He held it open and said, "Thank you, really." "Anytime," I said. And then, just before I stepped out, "You know, for someone who claimed not to be afraid of anything, I was afraid of exactly the right amount," he said. I smiled the whole drive home. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is sit very still and trust someone they've just met. And sometimes the most intimate thing you can offer another person is simply steadiness. The certainty that you know what you're doing and that you'll be careful with them. That's the whole job, really. That's all it ever is.